Finally, here we're waiting, folks. Sorry for that wait. Welcome, folks, to the Daily Wrap. Robert Quigley for president. We're on the road to the White House. Well, folks, tonight's going to be a short live stream, but nevertheless, it's going to hit on one of the most important topics that is currently affecting American politics across the board, and that is polarization. There are a couple of recent facts that really stand out, and when we put them together, we have to step back and ask ourselves, why do these events happen? What's going on? And why do we need to look at it? And why is it so important? Essentially, we ask ourselves, how in the world did Trumpism arise in American politics? The answer to that question is very simple. The vast majority of his supporters feel like they have been left behind in the American system. They're poor folks. They are stretched out across America. They are mostly working class. They're living paycheck to paycheck. If they're lucky, they have dim prospects. And they strongly feel like the system has left them behind. That's the starting point for Trumpism. Let's move on and look at another issue that came up in recent history. Why did folks think it was a good idea to kidnap the Michigan governor? Lordy, lordy, lordy. This is another sign of desperate folks fighting back against the system that they see that is unfair, unjust, and not helpful for their lives. Let's go on. Everybody knows about January 6th. Why did all those people go to the Capitol on January 6th? Why did they protest? Obviously, no one really, truly down in their hearts thought they were going to overthrow the government. Of course, if they did, then perhaps they were a little too far gone. But I think the vast majority of those folks looked at that as a protest. And what exactly were they saying? Well, they were saying they're unhappy with the American system. Look at the members of that audience, so to speak. Those folks were very unhappy with their lot in life. We know the results of January 6th. We know that Donald Trump was the instigator and his team was behind all of the activities on January 6th. When we get to the White House, folks, I will pardon every single member and person that was in that crowd on January 6th because they were not responsible. They were not the responsible party for the damage and the instigation of that act. It was Donald Trump. But that's kind of a side point because what we really want to talk about here is why were so many people willing to overthrow the government in quotations? Well, the simple answer is a lot of folks are very unhappy with what's been happening in America in relation to their lot in life. And that is just another example. So let's move on a little bit. We have a large population that we classify as election deniers. They believe that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. They believe that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president. Right or wrong is not the point here. The issue is, why do we have so many people that are classified as election deniers? We're talking about millions. We're not talking about a handful, millions of people. Well, the answer is exactly the same. We have a lot of people that are very unhappy with their lot in the American life. And they do have a lot to be unhappy about. Let's move on a little bit. Let's talk about interest groups. If everyone would picture the American economy, the American country, and our political life, what has been happening since the country was founded is one interest group after another has fought tooth and nail, head to toe, as hard as they could to carve out some piece of America for their own. And there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of carve outs. Okay, whether we're talking about the medical profession restricting the education of new doctors to artificially inflate their salaries, if we're talking about all the professions engaged in similar activity, if we're talking about telephone companies, their carve outs, insurance companies, their carve outs, if we're talking about uh, trades, their carve outs. We're talking about every kind of educated field seeking some kind of carve out in the American system. What we have, folks, if we could just imagine the map of America, we have had this country sliced and diced in every which way by one group or another. That's the image that we should have in our minds. Now, the problem when we do that is every little carve out makes it that much more difficult for everybody else in the society to live. This puts America in a stalemate. It locks people into positions in life, whether it's economic, social, geographical, and they can't do better. They can't escape those positions. So the idea of endless interest groups, the idea of endless carve outs, this is in fact equivalent to death by 1,000 paper cuts. This is exactly what is happening to America. And this is one reason why we have endured 3 decades of anemic economic growth. So let's move on a little bit. We have polarization. The extreme left is unhappy. The extreme right is unhappy. Why is that? Well, it's very simple because from their points of view, they think they've got the right answers and no one else or the rest of the society is not on their side. So they further entrench themselves into their far extreme positions. The vast majority, over half of the adults, do not participate in voting or supporting through donations political campaigns. So what winds up happening is fewer and fewer people in the extremes come to dominate American politics. It's a real mess. We've heard phrases like everyone's living in a bubble. Well, what is a bubble? You know, the typical person in America probably has 50 friends, 100 friends. They might say they have 500 friends. You can't have 500 friends. You might know 500 people, but you probably are friends with a dozen, a couple dozen. Yeah, you might, get on with 50 people, but you're not going to know a large number of people that well. So we have bubbles. Everyone is living in a bubble, and many times these bubbles do not overlap with each other, and we have these groups of isolation around our society. This is a problem because it's a problem getting out messages. It's a problem with debates. It's a problem with helping folks see the world from different points of view. We've essentially come to a stalemate in American politics. Everything I'm describing today is different views of polarization in American politics. And this is a massive problem. It doesn't go away by itself, it only gets worse as time goes on. Now, if we don't solve these problems, if we can't get a larger part of the American population involved in politics, there are many, many dangerous uh, uh, results coming our way. Like, for example, Donald Trump could have very well ended democracy as we know it. The simmering is still there. It's underneath the surface. The system is still creating the same bottlenecks, the same carve outs, the same deprivation of better lives. It's only a question of time before we get another would be, wannabe dictator like Donald Trump. Don't hold your breath, folks, because of course it will come if we don't change the course of the American political structure. Let's talk about legislation for a second. Legislation is passed left, right, and center in Washington, D.C. It is stocked full of giveaways and carve outs for this interest group and that interest group. Lots of legislation these days are window dressing legislation. Let's talk about global warming, for example. The Democrats have put forth this climate change legislation in recent history, but the reality is it does not address the real solutions that must happen in order to reverse global warming, climate change, and put the planet back into a state of a natural, perpetual healing and health. DC is a game. We have to change that, folks. The solution is for Americans to participate in the political system in greater numbers. Americans need to find their favorite political candidates, donate, and support those candidates. It must happen continuously. We're in a very bad situation in the country, and the only way we're going to solve it is by increasing the number of voters and increasing voter participation all across the board. Many, most problems, most questions in life have many different answers. But in the American mindset today, we have an extreme left Democratic answer, we have an extreme right Republican answer. Between these two extremes, there are lots and lots of answers and combinations of answers that can be pursued, but they cannot be brought into reality or force if everybody is either not participating or they are on the extremes. Folks, we've got to change the course of America. We've got to eliminate the carve outs. We've got to design systems and rules and regulations that benefit the whole society, not some special interested group of the society. So, folks, that's really all I wanted to say today. I just wanted to highlight the polarization that we're facing. The Independence Party, as we know, is a centrist party. All of the solutions to the problems that we face are somewhere between the extreme left and the extreme right. And with your support and your participation, we will make America a much greater place. Until we meet again.